For many of us, it's fantasy soccer season, where every week we compare player stats and plug in a best 11. So that's what we're doing this week on An American Game, but with U.S. Soccertowns.
And Soccertowns are special to us. We made a documentary called Soccertown USA about Kearney, New Jersey, considered to be one of the cradles of American soccer. Scottish and Irish immigrants coming to work in the giant mills of Kearney brought their dreams and their game with them.
As we've said many times before, and really at this point I should just have it tattooed on my forehead, soccer was being played in Kearney before it was in Brazil.
But a soccer town is anywhere that people came with those dreams in that game. And if the maxim that towns make a nation is true, then the same goes for soccer. Our soccer towns with their own rich and varied stories make the United States a soccer nation. And we believe they make soccer an American game.
Like, we've kind of made that our whole thing. It's like the show title and all. Anyway, in our last show of the season, we're going to put out a lineup of soccer towns, celebrate places where the game took root and stubbornly held on even through the so-called dark ages of U.S. soccer. This won't be a full history of each community, more of a sketch, but as we've tried to do in every episode, we'll tell some maybe forgotten stories from our soccer history and introduce some characters who should be remembered.
And bump into a few soccer towns we've met before. But this won't be a comprehensive list. It's a starting 11, not the starting 11.
And it is also, we realize, a lot longer than our other episodes.
It's a full 90, with added time.
And that can take a lot out of you. Trust us, we have been editing this, and our producer, Matt, has even requested a transfer.
Which, of course, we denied. But feel free to listen at your own pace and stay hydrated.
To help us with our national tour, we reached out to Tom's soccer historian community, those nerds whose superpower is still being able to operate a microfilm machine.
Including some of the Avengers from the Society for American Soccer History.
Tom is determined to make Avengers happen. But folks, that's up to you. But yes, everyone was incredibly generous with their time and their scholarship. Like us, they believe a lot can be learned from chasing the ball around this soccer nation.
This is An American Game. Soccer towns need soccer neighborhoods, and a tiny slice of Kearney, New Jersey was one of America's original ones. It sat next to the railroad tracks, sandwiched between thread mills. Called Cooper's Block after the family that built tenements there, immigrants and their children lived, worked, and played in what became known as simply the Block.
Shaped like an old leather soccer boot, the Block was environmental determinism, geography as sporting destiny. You were born in Kearney, you were a soccer person, kicking a ball as soon as you could walk, playing pickup with kids on the town sandlots. Your soccer accomplishments were mentioned in your obituary.
We talked about some of those cradle-to-grave soccer folks in earlier episodes. Men like Jack Swithenby, the AFA Cup hero, and the next generation of Kearney players who were members of that first national team that Tom Cahill took to Scandinavia in 1960. Cahill, the father of American soccer, was the subject of episode 1, and we'll be seeing him again today.
These days, the fish and chip shops in Kearney have been replaced by Portuguese and Peruvian joints. And so Kearney embodies themes we'll see in our other soccer towns. Demographics shifting with every historic wave of immigrants, creating layers in the core sample of a town.
Also, soccer is family legacy, almost oral tradition, handed down from generation to generation, usually connected to a local youth club.
In Kearney, that was Thistle Soccer Club, named for the flower of Scotland in order to appease rival Celtic and Rangers supporters in the New World of New Jersey.
Soccer towns also need places to play, whether it's urban lots or public parks or turf behind school fences. In Kearney, that's Gunnell Oval. When I played there as a kid, you could see the Twin Towers in the distance. After 100 years, the oval finally got turfed. It's a beautiful facility with 6 or 7 fields. In Harrison, near where the Red Bulls play, the courts were the proving ground. A winner-stays-on crucible that forged players like Tony Meola, John Harkes, and Tab Ramos.
Anything else make it a soccer town?
A soccer store, serving as almost a barbershop or social club. That once was J&J Sporting Goods, but now it's the Soccer Post run by the Maras, one of Thistle's founding families. There's usually a soccer bar or social club where there's always a game on, like the Scots Club.
And we can't forget the newspaper folks, because their copy promoted the game and left the first draft of our history. Think about the Paul Gardners, Stephen Goffs, and Grant Walls of American soccer. They literally got soccer news out of the margins and above the fold. In Kearney, that was Tom Connell, who was the airport terminal manager at Idlewild, now JFK Airport.
Connell was an all-stater at Kearney High in 1926. His youth team won the New Jersey State League in 27.
In 1930, Tom began working for the Newark Evening News, where he wrote a soccer column all the way until 1972.
He covered it all, the local teams in the American Soccer League, as well as the local lads like Tom Flory and Jimmy Douglas, who were with the national team at the first World Cup.
After that 1930 World Cup in Uruguay, the Great Depression hit Kearney Industries and its teams in the ASL. Clark Thread, sponsor of that first American soccer dynasty, moved its operation out of town. It was part of a trend that impacted the game's early hotbeds and that we will see all through this episode. The mills closed, teams folded. The dark ages of U.S. soccer that we have so often talked about set in.
These clouds lifted with the coming of the North American Soccer League in the late 60s, early 70s. Suburban kids across the country began to take up the game. It wasn't just first and second gen kids in the soccer hotbeds anymore.
But industrial towns still struggled with unemployment, and in Kearney, that was compounded by its location at the epicenter of drug trafficking in the Northeast. And think about the Newark area. You've got an airport, a train line, a major highway, and a port all right there. Add addiction to unemployment, and soccer became a refuge, and for some, a way out. When the NASL folded, there was no pro league to shoot for, but if you could stay clean, the game could get you to college.
And that was reality for a lot of guys who grew up with Tony, John, and Tab, who managed to continue the Kearney legacy and lead the U.S. national team to 2 World Cups. College soccer helped them get out of Kearney.
We're not going to do the full Kearney story in this episode because we have told it before in our documentary, Soccertown USA. So we're going to leave it there with Kearney in goal in our starting 11.
Let's move from Jersey strong to Philly tough. You know, I dislike Philly sports. I mean, their fans, the worst ever. My wife's side of the family is Eagles, Phillies, Sixers, Union. Annoying.
I mean, some people will remember an NFL game way back in December 1968 when Eagles fans started booing the Santa who came out for the halftime Christmas pageant. Then they pelted him with snowballs, which escalated to hoagies and then beer bottles.
Who does that?
Philly fans. Bit of trivia, that Santa was a 20-year-old kid. And one reason that the fans were so mad is that the Eagles sucked that year, but they had won just enough games to lose out on the number 1 pick in the draft, O.J. Simpson, who would later be with Tony, John, and Tab in the national team's 1990 hype song music video. Time is a flat circle.
Indeed. Truth be told, I thought about leaving Philly out of our starting 11 just to mess with my friend Ed Farnsworth. He ran the Philly soccer page, and now he's a force behind Sash. He's an Avenger, so we can't do it. Besides, as Ed told us, U.S. soccer doesn't exist without Philly.
U.S. capital S soccer doesn't exist without Philly. As we discussed in episode 1, Philly soccer folks came to the rescue and put up the money for that 1913 Soccer Congress that led to the formation of the U.S. Football Association.
And the city has a litany of firsts. The first attempts at an interregional soccer league. 5 players on that first national team in 1916. The first U.S. Open Cup dynasty in Bethlehem Steel. The first American-born president of U.S. soccer in Elmer Schroeder. And the first Hall of Fame in the Philly Old-Timer Soccer Organization. It's very impressive.
We've talked in other episodes about U.S. soccer history being roughly 150 years old, divided into roughly 3 50-year chapters. The first 50 years, up until around 1930 and the first World Cup, were pretty good. Soccer was taking root, leagues were starting, there were big cup competitions. But then came the Dark Ages, the middle chapter, where the Great Depression and World War II pushed the game back to its ethnic enclaves who kept the game alive until the 90s and the success of the national teams, particularly the women, and MLS.
And that's one of the great gifts that immigrants have given to soccer in this country. I mean, they kept it alive in those enclaves during those dark years.
Philadelphia was one of those keepers of the flame. Ethnic clubs thrived even during those Depression years, with Scots playing for the Bluebells in blue and white horizontal striped kits against the German-Hungarians, known as the Hunkies, and Irish guys on the Celtics. There were also trade union-backed teams like the Bricklayers and Hosiery Local, and even some company teams survived, like Mighty Bethlehem Steel and Fleischer Yarn.
Len Oliver recalled those teams in an interview with Ed Farnsworth. Len grew up in Philly, but we'll feature him later in another city. Still, we loved reading about his childhood when he played street soccer with a misshapen, bladder-filled ball. Hey listeners, do you remember your first ball? Your first pair of boots? Len had hand-me-down Mansfields, which were similar to the ones sold in those early Spalding catalogs. High-top leather, steel toes, and nail-in studs.
With their warp ball and heavy shoes, the kids would go to the 100-year-old abandoned Franklin Cemetery and play with tombstones for goals. Or they'd go to Cambria Stadium at Torresdale and Kensington Avenue because it was on the trolley line and watch the Philadelphia German Americans take on sides like Brooklyn Hispano.
And the German Americans were founded by the Philadelphia German Rifle Club as First German SC in 1924. People started calling them the Philadelphia German Americans, and it stuck. In 1936, they defeated St. Louis Shamrocks in the U.S. Open Cup. That was the final, becoming the first amateur team to win it. The team was so good that 5 of its players were selected for the 1934 World Cup team.
The Philly team would move up to the newly relaunched American Soccer League for the 1933-34 season and place 9 players on the team that went to the Berlin Olympics in 1936, where they lost to Nemesis Italy 1-0. In 1942, as the U.S. entered World War II, the German Americans became, and this was a smart rebrand, the Americans, and they dominated the ASL through the 40s and 50s, along with another Philly team, the Nationals, who featured the legendary Walt Barr and Benny McLaughlin.
But grassroots soccer was also thriving during those decades. Ray Lynch was born in Glasgow in 1921, but soon his father John would move the family to the U.S., settling in that Kensington neighborhood, near Temple University so he could work in a shipyard. Lynch once recalled, kind of a melting pot of Irish, Scots, German, and Jewish people, but soccer was very strong down there, of course. It was the sport in Kensington at the time, even through the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
His father played, of course, for the Bluebells, but Ray joined the Lighthouse Boys Club, Philly's first soccer development factory, and stayed active in the game for the rest of his life. He moved a few miles west to Springfield in the 1950s and started the Springfield Soccer Club. By 1963, the club was thriving, and Ray wrote about it in the local paper, praising the efforts of mothers involved in the club. He referred to them as, quote, soccer moms, unquote, which we think was the first time that phrase was ever used in print.
We could go on and on about Philly's past. Let's end with its future. The YSC Academy at the Philly Union. YSC is the brainchild of Richie Graham, who we played against in college, and the results of this combo school academy are bearing incredible fruit for both club and country. It's the 21st century version of the Lighthouse Boys. 7 current or former YSC Academy graduates, guys like Brendan Aronson, Paxton Aronson, Austin Trusty, Mark McKenzie, Quinn Sullivan, Nathan Harriel, and Jack McGlynn, were called into the June 25 U.S. Men's National Team camp. And then there's Quinn's younger brother, Cavin. He's the teenage phenom that Man City signed.
Okay, we'll do one more dip back into the past. Quinn and Cavin's grandfather, Larry Sullivan, was a hotshot pitcher when he shipped off to Vietnam with the Marines. To make it through the war, he dreamed of 2 things, seeing his family and playing baseball again. Both were in jeopardy when he was shot. He survived, but he lost the use of 3 fingers on his left hand, his pitching arm. Back in Philadelphia, he couldn't pitch anymore, but he could continue playing soccer. He'd been a 3-time all-conference pick at Northeast Catholic. Larry then played at Temple, went on to coach high school and college teams, including Villanova. You could say it set him on a path that his family has more than followed. Larry's son Brendan recalls, quote, I grew up in a soccer neighborhood, which was odd in the early 80s. Scotch, Irish, German, Italian, Irish, Polish folks all lived in a three-neighborhood cluster. Port Richmond, Bridesburg, Fishtown, Kensington, Juniata, all immigrants, and soccer was big there, close quote.
Even I can cheer that, but don't ask me to do the fly, Eagles, fly thing. That's annoying. Okay, who's next on our back line? When Soccertown USA came out, our old college coach Bob Bradley was at LAFC, and Kirk went to visit training one day, and Mike Sorber runs up and says, "Love the doc. You should do St. Louis next." So this one's for Mike, who cleared an early Columbia shot off the goal line in the Rose Bowl in '94, and then helped the U.S. men's national team to one of its biggest wins ever.
But we've already paid tribute to St. Louis on An American Game. It was the birthplace of Thomas Cahill. When he was a kid in the 1870s, the gateway city was on its way to becoming one of our most significant soccer towns.
And Dave Lang, another one of those Sash Avengers, reminds us that St. Louis was the first capital of soccer in the U.S. Irish and Scottish immigrants first brought the game to the banks of the Mississippi. In short order, the Catholic Church formed a league, the Catholic Youth Council, or CYC, which produced lots and lots of talent. Each parish had a team, and priests even coached a few of them.
At St. Philip Neri, it was Father Bill, a recipient of the Bronze Star for bravery as he tended to the wounded as an army chaplain on Omaha Beach during the D-Day invasion in 1944. Father Bill was a tough, no-nonsense coach who would give you a stern talking to if you needed it. In the 2 decades after the war, the CYC grew fourfold to over 450 teams.
I think his favorite, you knucklehead or you bonehead. Those teams turned out players for high schools and colleges as well as pro and national teams. Incredibly, 5 players from the city's Italian neighborhood led the 1950 World Cup team to that upset against England. St. Louis was the incubator of the American style. Fast, physical, and direct play.
Lang has run the numbers, and 76 men from St. Louis have played for the national team, more than any other city, even LA, Chicago, and New York. Today, St. Louis is known for national team players like Josh Sargent and Tim Ream, and on the women's side, think Lori Chalupny, who made the U.S. team at age 17, and of course, Becky Sauerbrunn and her 219 caps.
There's a cool mural of Becky in downtown St. Louis. Why the long distinguished line? St. Louis kept playing generation after generation because it had that structured youth system. The second and third generations didn't abandon soccer for baseball, football, and basketball. The CYC is still active each fall, but travel soccer long ago superseded it. The city had 2 big clubs in Scott Gallagher and Bush. They're now merged. But before that, they were part of the city's north-south soccer divide.
Which is classic urban infighting, right? Who has the best players and teams? St. Louis University used to have fierce intra-squad scrimmages between North and South Siders. Ty Keogh, a star player himself, but also the son of World Cup veteran Harry, said those games were tougher than actual college opponents. Their version of Trees and Trolls. Pat McBride coached the St. Louis Steamers in the Major Indoor Soccer League, and he would split the team up the same way, North versus South.
And speaking of indoor soccer, Walter Gessler invented his own game in the 1930s. He called it hock sock, and it was played on gym floors with a hockey net and a soccer ball. I guess an early version of futsal. I believe it's still played in St. Louis, and Gessler managed the 1948 Olympic and 1950 World Cup teams. Take that, Bullets Cahill.
Poor Bullets. Never got his shot. Girls got in on the action pretty early, too. The CYC, that Catholic parish league, formed girls' teams in the late 1960s, years before the Title IX bump that the game got across the rest of the country. Harry Keogh's daughter began playing for Immaculate Heart of Mary in 1970 as a 3rd grader. The big rival was St. Blaise, who had Jan and Joan Getmeyer. These daughters of St. Louis became soccer stars, suiting up for Royal Midtown Chrysler and Bush SC before going to the University of Missouri-St. Louis in 1981. Both sisters were 3-time All-Americans who led UMSL to the NCAA Final Four. Both are in the St. Louis Soccer Hall of Fame.
Stepping from past to present, City FC carries the torch for the Gateway City in the highest division of U.S. soccer, while also tapping into its roots. They have a whole City Futures platform. It offers free training and tournaments, not the dreaded pay-to-play, giving access to underrepresented neighborhoods, including more recent arrivals from places like Vietnam and Bosnia.
In 2000, a 16-year-old named Vedad Ibisevic moved from Bosnia to St. Louis with his family. Vedo played soccer at Roosevelt High, then went to St. Louis University, where he set a freshman goal-scoring record before leaving to sign for PSG. Yes, that PSG.
Slew to PSG. I love it.
He ended up moving to the Bundesliga, where he scored 80 goals, and he's the second leading scorer ever for Bosnia-Herzegovina's national team. Bill McDermott, SLU alum and legendary announcer known as Mr. Soccer, has said of Ibisevic, quote, "He's not considered to be a totally local guy, but he should be. He carries the banner of St. Louis everywhere he goes. I consider him a St. Louisan," close quote.
You might as well be talking about the tension in American soccer that goes way back to, well, even Bullets Cahill. The newer immigrants aren't local guys. They're not American enough.
But who are we to argue with Mr. Soccer? Or with another example of immigrants finding soccer towns and adding their passion and their talent to the American soccer story. That story has been forever enriched by the first capital of soccer in the United States, St. Louis.
And since we're playing a back three, let's head back east for number 4, to the city of spinners and winners, Fall River, Massachusetts, home to a storied soccer club and one of the most notorious murders in American history.
Andrew Borden was a wealthy mill owner, real estate mogul, and banker in Fall River. There are reports of Borden mill operatives playing soccer in the late 1870s. He remarried after the death of his wife, and his daughters, Emma and Lizzie, didn't seem to get along with their stepmother. And Lizzie was the prime suspect when Andrew and Abby Borden were found hatcheted to death in 1892.
And there's even a nursery rhyme about it. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41.
Despite that evidence, Lizzie was acquitted, and no one else was ever charged. There's still a whole cottage industry surrounding the murders.
And that includes the Lizzie Borden house. It's a combo museum and bed and breakfast, if you can believe that. You can spend the night where Abby Borden was murdered. But in 1920, it was bought by the Mark family, who ran a toy shop out of it for 20 years.
Sam Mark was 24 years old, born in Fall River to Ukrainian Jewish immigrants from Kyiv, who changed their last name from Markelevich to make it easier to fit in, like so many immigrants did. Sam loved sports and started out as a basketball and baseball promoter, but he noticed how many people were showing up to Fall River's Rovers games and decided to get in on the soccer action.
Fall River was a working-class soccer town. A novel based there was titled City of the Dinner Pail, after the 3-tiered lunchbox that workers carried to the mills, where they made cotton print cloth. The many English, Scottish, Irish, French, Canadian, Portuguese immigrants made up a vast pool of players and fans.
There were 3 main soccer neighborhoods, the North End, Globe Village, and the East End. When Rovers were founded in 1884 as the Chase Street Rovers, in homage to Blackburn, they were one of a dozen clubs in the area, teams like the Olympics, the Pan Americans, and their big rival, the East Ends.
But by 1887, Rovers had separated themselves from the pack, which they leaned into by changing their name to Fall River. Denny Shea, the father of American goalkeepers, was between the pipes, and they were early repeat AFA Cup champs.
So, Sam Mark saw the power of a local soccer brand and created his own. In 1922, he bought Fall River FC and rebranded the club to Mark's Men.
Which is why you may have heard of the Fall River Marksmen and thought it was named for guys who aimed and shot well.
I will confess, I was one of those people. I love that it was literally just Mark's Men, as in men belonging to Mark.
And Sam Mark backed the club. They won ASL and US Open Cup titles. He also built them a stadium across the state border in Tiverton, because Rhode Island didn't have blue laws, so the marksmen can play on Sundays. Crowds of over 10,000 were common, and on June 3, 1928, for a friendly match with Glasgow Rangers, 15,000 packed the stadium. There's a wonderful picture of it. Who do you think was in goal for that 0-0 draw, Kirk?
I'm going to guess our friend Jimmy Douglas.
Bingo, he traveled. He played all over the place. Get him in goal. Played in the World Cup in 1930.
And while Sam stacked the marksmen with Scottish ringers and the odd Carney guy, the team also featured homegrown stars like Bert Patnaud and Billy Gonzalez. They often played teams on U.S. tours like Rangers and Sparta Prague, repping U.S. soccer to the rest of the world. And in August 1930, while the U.S. national team was in Uruguay playing in the first World Cup, the marksmen toured Central Europe, playing 6 games over 11 days. They ended the tour early because of a dispute over gate receipts, which prompted a headline in the New Britain Herald that I also love, quote, "Soccer team quits," unquote.
Archie Stark was on that marksman team.
Which was really bizarre to find because we've made a point a couple of times in this series about how Archie couldn't be on the World Cup team. He'd pulled himself out of it because he had a new auto shop business and he couldn't risk being away from it for months.
Perhaps it seems that a share as a guest player for a couple weeks was too much to turn down. Say it ain't so, Archie, you mercenary.
Also on that marksman team was a 21-year-old goalkeeper named Johnny Redder, who had been born in Poland and came over with his family when he was a kid. He also took to baseball, playing first base for his high school team, and so when the ASL was sputtering in 1932, he switched back to baseball and played for the Boston Red Sox. He is the only guy to ever play pro baseball and soccer at Fenway Park.
Remarkable. 2 other Fall River natives, John Clarkey Sousa and Ed Sousa, no relation, played at Mark Stadium for the Ponta Delgado Soccer Club, a Portuguese club. They were on the field in Brazil when the U.S. beat England at the 1950 World Cup. But the once mighty Fall River had lost its position at the top of U.S. Soccertowns, and it never really recovered from the collapse of the textile industry.
That's according to our friend Derek Gonzalez, the official club historian for the Marksmen, a Phoenix club because it reemerged out of the ashes back in 2019. That same year, Fall River's 27-year-old mayor was charged with fraud. He raised more than $360,000 to develop an app, then spent more than $230,000 of it on jewelry, a Mercedes, and his political career. Voters demanded a recall vote, and the ballot had 2 questions. Should the mayor be recalled? And who should be the new mayor? He was recalled and voted back in on the same night.
That, Las Gonzalez, is the definition of Fall River right there, and it underlines the challenge of getting things done in a city, like building grassroots soccer facilities. Today, there's so little evidence of Fall River soccer history. There are no statues or plaques anywhere. Just a small sheet metal sign on Billy Gonzalez Field.
But there are some signs of renewal, green shoots in the soil of this iconic soccer town. Just over the border in neighboring Tiverton, one of those gigantic old mill buildings has been repurposed as a multi-sports facility that includes 2 turf soccer fields, and some of the kids who train there belong to the Ruben Resendez Academy. Resendez grew up in Fall River, playing for clubs like Nor'easter SC and the first New England Revolution Academy team. He also spent some time in Lisbon at Benfica's academy before coming home to be a youth and college coach.
A soccer town survives and thrives when kids can not just play good soccer, but also watch good soccer. And Fall River kids can see local college programs like UMass Lowell and the Resendez coach Bryant University.
Or the new USL team, Rhode Island FC, back where my in-laws live, which started play in 2024 and is just up the road in a brand new stadium in Pawtucket.
Fall River is back, baby.
The nation's capital is a weird soccer town. We don't have the same stories of mill teams playing a century ago because DC has always been a different kind of company town. But it has other ingredients, like its diversity, its immigrants, that make it our 5th in the lineup. And if we don't see the deep roots of American soccer in old teams like Clark Thread or Fall River, we can find it in people like Len Oliver. His father immigrated from Scotland to Philadelphia in 1923 and played amateur soccer for the Kensington Bluebells with Ray Lynch's dad.
And Kirk and I agreed, DC goes into midfield, but we're not going to put it on the right or left wing. We're going to just go right down the middle, nonpartisan, center midfield. Like Ray, Len grew up with the game and led Temple to 2 national championships and 2 undefeated seasons between 1951 and 54.
After graduation, Len kept playing, for U.S. Olympic teams, amateur sides, and military teams while he served in the Army in the 1950s. He even represented the U.S. at the Pan Am Games in Brazil in 1963.
And after his playing career ended, he even had a brief stint in the CIA.
Yeah, forget Stan Chesney. Len Oliver was the international man.
And Len got a master's, then a doctorate, and then spent the next 10 years traveling the country for the National Endowment for the Humanities. My kind of guy.
He finally settled in D.C., and while setting up a public policy firm, got his A license. In 1977, he joined new youth club DC Stoddard as their director of coaching, where he would remain for 25 years, and a 2021 name change to DC Soccer Club, which was to disassociate itself from Benjamin Stoddard, the namesake of the school where the club began, who was the first Secretary of the Navy and also a slave owner. Again, soccer history shakes hands with U.S. history.
And DC Soccer Club is now the largest youth soccer organization in the district, with around 7,000 kids between the ages of 3 and 23. And over his career, it's estimated that Len coached more than 5,000 youth soccer coaches. 5,000! That's some legacy for Len Oliver, a National Soccer Hall of Famer who passed away in 2022.
Now, the former DC Stoddard Club was founded by a group of parents who were inspired by the soccer they were seeing in the capital, including the NASL's Washington Diplomats.
Ooh, we're going to dip into some NASL.
We're dipping into the Dips.
Yep, the Dips have been founded back in 1974 and today are remembered mostly, if at all, as the team Johan Cruyff played for one crazy season. He'd come to the U.S. in 1979 to play for Renus Mikkels on the LA Aztecs, but after 1 year, they couldn't afford his salary anymore, and the Dips stepped up.
His teammates couldn't believe that they were going to get to play with the Ajax and Barcelona legend.
And soccer people couldn't believe he was going to play for Coach Gordon Bradley, an old-school Englishman of the get-stuck-in lad, kick-and-rush school.
Pablo Maurer, another fantastic soccer journalist, wrote a great piece a few years ago about Cruyff's Diplomats days. One of his teammates remembered him just kind of wandering around during games, screaming, "Somebody do something!"
And later in the season, Cruyff walked up to Bradley's chalkboard before a game and erased his team setup, then wrote up how he wanted them to play that night.
His first season was the Diplomats' last, but he left enough highlights, like one of the greatest goals scored in NASL history, to inspire a generation of DC soccer fans. Still, objectively speaking, the Diplomats were a failure, one of several in DC pro soccer history. The Washington Whips played in the United Soccer Association in 1967 and 68, and if you love league acronyms, gotta credit whoever came up with USA.
It's hard to believe no one has ever added that to the U.S. soccer alphabet soup before this.
Right? I mean, it was right there. The USA was a bizarre league. All the teams were imported whole from foreign leagues. So the DC team was actually just Aberdeen FC from Scotland, and the name Whips came from a newspaper contest.
And another DC pro team started as an amateur side in 1963 when a Scottish immigrant named Norman Sutherland started Washington Britannica. It was an encyclopedia team. They joined the ASL, here we are, again, Bullets, Cahill, and rebranded in 1968 as the Washington Darts.
They won 2 league titles in 1968 and 69, playing their home games at a high school. And they were the first pro soccer team in U.S. history to have a black coach when Lincoln Phillips, the goalkeeper, became player coach.
I met Phillips at a coaching convention. What a gentleman. He had been the goalkeeper on Trinidad and Tobago's national team, helping them win a bronze medal at the 1967 Pan Am Games. But after leading the Darts to back-to-back titles, Howard University called and offered him a job coaching their men's team.
He once told the New York Times that the decision to go to Howard was an easy one. Quote, "My salary on the professional level was minuscule, and professional soccer at that time was on its last legs. What made the switch even easier was that I was allowed to go to school free, as I was also pursuing my undergraduate degree," unquote.
I mean, this is a thing, right? I mean, we know people who coached professionally in the late 60s, early 70s. They had full-time jobs, right? And this was, you needed an employer to be sympathetic so you could coach pro.
We've got a coach coming up who coached the first women's national team and was also a welder.
I know a tool and die maker, pro coach.
Phillips recruited kids who were overlooked and ignored by most college programs. As he put it, quote, We wanted to be the best at a sport largely identified and dominated by Europeans. So the team was more than an athletic program. It became an extension of the civil rights movement in a way only sports can, by achieving a set of objective results and debunking myths that doubted our abilities to be disciplined, organized, and intelligent enough to win against the best the country had to offer.
And Howard did, beating the all-white St. Louis Billikens in the 1971 NCAA final. And that rattled the NCAA, who stripped Howard of the title because of, quote, player eligibility violations, unquote. 2 players had played amateur soccer in Trinidad, which had used up their eligibility, and 2 others had not taken college entrance exams, which were required in order for the NCAA to predict a GPA of at least 1.6. This makes all the foreign players from European pro setups in college soccer today seem downright quaint.
Howard argued that the rules were vague and discriminatory against foreign players, and, as Phillips pointed out, and he was actually in class with some of them, all of the players had GPAs above 3.0. But the NCAA refused to reverse the ruling.
So then Phillips and the Howard program were determined to get back to the title that they felt had been stolen. Jermaine Scott is a scholar who studied the Howard soccer program, and he's currently prepping a manuscript about what he calls black teamwork, a concept that challenges the colonial and racial underpinnings of modern sport. Phillips took a recruiting trip to Nigeria to add to his diasporic team. And in 1974, they beat St. Louis again, winning another title. A winding road from Washington, Britannica. Howard is now coached by Joe Jai, a former U.S. international, whose father played for Ghana. His son Joe Jr. has played for the U.S. men's national team and FC Cincinnati in MLS.
Howard also started their women's program in 1996, and it has taken big steps in the last few years to match the legacy of the men's team. A girl my daughter grew up playing with is currently playing for the Bison. Shout out to Makende.
Whoop, whoop. Okay, let's go back to the not-so-illustrious history of DC pro teams. By 1983, the NASL was dying. Attendance was plummeting, and the league had lost its TV contract. And U.S. soccer wasn't doing much better.
The U.S. men hadn't made a World Cup since 1950, and we had an automatic spot in the '84 Olympics that could end up being a bloodbath. So, joining forces, the NASL and U.S. Soccer decided to create Team America, an NASL club consisting of American players skimmed from other clubs that would train and play together in order to prepare for international tournaments. It was a classic case of 2 weak things coming together to make another weak thing.
Team America would be based at the nation's capital, obviously. And some folks were optimistic, despite seeing the whips, the darts, and 2 different incarnations of the diplomats come and go in the last 15 years. Team America general manager Bo Rogers told the Washington Post in January 1983, quote, "The Team America concept will erase all of those memories," end quote. Classic dumb optimism.
Like Team America signing an 8-year lease at RFK Stadium, or offering Renus Michels the coaching job. U.S. Soccer asked him how long it would take for an American to become a good soccer player, and before turning down the job, Michels apparently said, 5 years. That's how long it takes for a foreigner to become an American citizen.
Oof. What's Dutch for burned?
Bluntwand.
Despite a few good results early in the season, including a chippy win over the Cosmos, Team America skidded through the second half of the campaign. Quarter of their total home attendance came in a sold-out game against Fort Lauderdale, where most of the people had come to see the Beach Boys concert after the match.
The team shut down after the last game. One player recalled, quote, "They wouldn't even let us take the jerseys. They came around with a garbage bag and said, 'Hey, you got to turn in your stuff.' I was like, 'Keep it. I wish you well,'" unquote. The league itself would go under a year later.
But pro soccer came back to DC in 1996 with the formation of DC United, who became the first MLS dynasty, winning 4 MLS Cups, 4 Supporter Shields, 3 U.S. Open Cups, and a CONCACAF Champions League title to boot. Len Oliver had season tickets, and when he'd bump into former players or coaches he'd worked with, he always got a kick out of it, saying, "I'd rather be called coach than doctor." I can identify with that. United's academy has been a pathway for local players to make it to the pros, a path that just got restructured with a residency program to help identify and develop players. The nation's capital may not have all those sepia photos we love around here, but it has newer immigrants and migrants who have shared their love of the game and built an even bigger soccer community.
With a little social and racial justice thrown in for a bonus. Come on, DC had to be in the 11.
Okay, DC in the midfield, double pivot. Okay, Mr. New Yorker, what borough is it going to be? There's a case for each one, but who you going with?
Look, I'm born and raised Manhattan, so shout out to playing in Central Park, Asphalt Green, and the incredible facility at Pier 40. But it could also be Brooklyn, which had those powerhouse shipyard teams like Robbins Dry Dock and Todd Shipyards before and after World War I. They battled the mighty Bethlehem Steel. Brooklyn FC won the first ever U.S. Open Cup in 1914, and there were a ton of British immigrants living there, plus an interesting mix of soccer-loving foreigners from other parts of Europe.
5 boroughs, lots of history. So I had a call on Dr. David Kilpatrick, an expert on the city's past, present, and future, and historian of the recently revived Cosmos. Here, let's go it.
Cosmos.
After some back and forth, we settled on Queens as the Big Apple's soccer town. And Queens is a big borough too, so we're narrowing it down to 2 parks.
The first is a modest 4.2-acre parcel wedged between factories, a Long Island Railroad freight line, and a row of attached houses. In 1925, 100 years ago, the neighborhood of Ridgewood, Queens, had a thriving Hungarian and ethnic German community, immigrants from the former Austro-Hungarian Empire. They had beer gardens, bratwurst, and soccer. Real estate developers were looking at the field where they played, so a bunch of them raised $1,500 to save it and then started a club, the German-Hungarian Metros.
And that's in Maspeth, Queens, just right near Ridgewood. And these German-Hungarians were far from the first club in the city. Let's get the history right. Norwegian immigrants set up Joa in Brooklyn in 1911. And there was Hota Bavarian in the Bronx. I played against both of them. They were organized in 1922. You know what Hota stands for, Kirk?
No idea.
Neither did I until I found it out just now. Hotel Workers of America. And there is a Hotel Workers like international organization. They must play against one another. Hota Hota.
Amazing. Other teams formed at the Oval and started playing in the city's German-American Soccer League, or GASL.
The GASL was the top league in the area after ASL shut down in 1933, and it still exists today as the Cosmopolitan Soccer League. They changed the name in 1977.
The German-Hungarian team, often referred to as the Knitters because so many of the players worked in mills making sweaters, were regularly kings of the city from the 30s all the way through the 50s.
I'm a little disappointed they weren't called the Hunkies, but Knitters.
I know.
Good. After World War II, the Oval was again on the auction block. In 1948, the owners told the German-Hungarians that they were cashing out, and the price was $30,000, about $400,000 today. Fortunately, the war had been good to club president Peter Max Wagner, one of the original founders, whose Remax knitting mill had won contracts to make sweaters for the military.
The German-Hungarians bought the field and added concession stands and bathrooms, and the Met Oval became a magnet for new waves of post-war refugees, like the Gottschier, ethnic Germans from what is now Slovenia. In 1951, a group of them formed a club, Blau-Weiß Gottschi, that became the German-Hungarians' biggest rival. Arnold Kren was a Gottschier. His wife Katie had come from Yugoslavia. During their 61 years of marriage, they always sat next to each other in the middle of the stands when the rival teams played, but each of them sat on the side of their native region. Their son Ricky, who grew up on the Oval, would play in the NASL.
Oh, amazing, amazing. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the Oval was another proving ground, like what Rucker Park or West 4th were for New York City basketball. European clubs like Hamburg and Stuttgart appeared there on their U.S. tours. Walter Barr from the 1950 U.S. team played there as well. So did Warner Roth of the Cosmos, and one of our favorite movies, Victory. And I played there too, and I've got to say, it didn't look like much. People called it a dust bowl, a sand pit, because grass couldn't grow. The caretaker would drive his truck across the field, towing a metal carcass of a box spring to smooth it out if he could. There were railroad ties for benches and a metal bar for spectators to lean up against. The oval definitely had charm, but you usually left with some cuts and bruises, maybe even a black eye.
And that's if you could find it at all. Like, it is tucked in. I'm guessing like Luton Stadium in London, Kenilworth Road, which Tom has been to.
A few years ago, last second, Declan Rice winner. Similar vibe.
I did not mean to make this about Arsenal.
Yeah, it's so embedded in the neighborhood that if you don't know where it is, you'll miss it.
Former U.S. national team captain Mike Windishman, who also played at the Oval with the Brooklyn Italians, once invited his teammate Bruce Murray to come down for a game. Windishman recalls, quote, "He took a taxi there, and I see him running from like 4 blocks away with his gear, and he tells me the cabbie kicked him out. He couldn't find his way in," unquote.
In 1999, the Met Oval was, once again, in financial peril. The club owed the city almost $500,000 in back taxes and had no choice but to sell. But then a group led by Jim Vogt, president of the Junior League, who had grown up playing there, told shareholders that, with the debt, they wouldn't make much on the sale. But if they formed a nonprofit Met Oval Foundation, they could keep soccer alive in Queens.
And thanks to people like Paul Gardner, the legendary Soccer America writer, the story of the Met Oval was right there on the desk of people like Hank Steinbrecher at U.S. Soccer, who had also grown up playing at the Oval and helped get money together for real turf and better lights, so that today the Metropolitan Oval is a bustling, multicultural youth soccer development hub for boys and girls. Tim Weah and Jack McGlynn came through BW Gotchi, and if you go out on a Saturday, you'll hear parents cheering in Greek, Italian, Polish, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, French, and English.
Yeah, Arabic, you name it. I mean, everything, right? That is multiculturalism, and it's long been the rule in that park and another Queens soccer park, Flushing Meadows Corona Park. Located in the northern part of Queens and best known now as the site of the U.S. Open tennis tournament and that big Unisphere sculpture from Men in Black, the area was, in the early part of the 20th century, a dump.
Literally a dump. A developer wanted to turn Flushing into a port, and that required landfill. So they started out with coal ash and street sweepings from Brooklyn, but a lot of horse manure and household trash just kind of got mixed in. And then train loads of ash from building incinerators around the city started coming out there. And Flushing was the Valley of Ashes from F. Scott Fitzgerald's Great Gatsby.
Hey, no spoilers on great
That's right. We got to
20th
keep
century
that
American
book.
literature.
One mound of ash, 90 feet tall, was called Mount Corona.
Parks Commissioner Robert Moses, whose urban planning and love of highways would do so much to destroy immigrant neighborhoods, looked at the eastward shift of the city's population and thought that the area would be a perfect location for a true central park. Flushing Meadows was selected as the site of not one, but 2 World's Fairs, in 1939 and 64. In 1939, the main theme was The World of Tomorrow, which presented a hopeful vision of the future and urban living and technological progress.
My dad, who grew up nearby, worked the 1964 World's Fair, and if you were to ask him, he would probably say the theme of that one was the introduction of Belgian waffles.
In the following year, while the Oval was still the preserve of European clubs like GH and Gotchi, an important piece of legislation opened up the country's playing fields. In 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson went to Ellis Island to sign what has been called the Civil Rights Act for Immigrants. Basically, the Immigration Act of 65 dismantled old laws that favored Northern and Western Europe, white immigrants. New York was about to become a true melting pot of soccer.
The New York Times documented some of this community last year, and the photos and the text were incredible, and they were by, I apologize if I am not getting the name right, Raul Vilches. Every Sunday, all year, people play. On a typical summer day, more than 100 games organized by dozens of private leagues are played on some 20 fields.
And our friend David Kilpatrick has always maintained that 11 players could be picked out of any of these Sunday games at Flushing and beat an MLS team. Quite the boast. Maybe even the New York City FC 11, who will be playing a few miles away in Willets Point, Queens in 2027.
One of the Flushing Meadows Corona Park leagues was founded in 1986 by Jorge Chavez, an immigrant from Peru. His grandson, Martin Chavez, runs it now. It was always meant to be a refuge for newcomers. In the 80s, they were mostly from South America, Colombian, Peruvian, Ecuadorian, some Chilean. By the 1990s, more Central Americans joined, and the 2000s brought a surge of Mexicans. Now, Venezuelans get off the bus at the Port Authority looking to make a life in the city.
And eventually they'll make their way to Flushing Meadows and find a game to watch or to play. A game that has survived snow, rain, and, we hope, ice.
And that's the whistle. After what some consider to be too much added time to the first half, we are heading to the locker room and we will be back on the other side.
Okay, you got us. Surprise, surprise. We're not in a locker room.
Although I am sitting in a big tub of ice right now.
And I'm wearing a chamois jockstrap playing Nintendo.
Which is a callback to episode 2. So if you're not skipping this part of the show, this is where we say how much we've enjoyed making this first season of An American Game.
And we're looking forward to coming back with a season 2. And you can help make that happen.
I was literally with a good friend last night who made a joke about Stan, the international man Chesney from our Lone Eagles episode. And I said, "Oh, I'm glad you listened. Did you take a second to rate it?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, shoot. How do I do that?" And that's a good friend. Are the rest of you going to do any better?
They will. I believe in our audience. Might even get my mom to do it, but that could take more than a few minutes. So just take a second after you listen on whatever platform you listen on and give us a rating.
If you're really motivated, or if I'm at your house yelling, "We're good friends, Michael. How could you do this to me?" You could even click subscribe.
Or add a little review.
Unless you're giving us 3 stars for not profiling every single member of the 1930 U.S. World Cup team.
Yeah, I mean, message received. Don't know if we needed that, though.
Yeah, so rate, subscribe, let us know you've listened, and hopefully liked it.
And we'll be back with more stories from An American Game soon.
Now, let's get our worsted wool shirts on and get back out there for the second half. Let's go,
Come
let's
on
go,
now,
USA,
come on.
USA, let's go, Tigers! Welcome back to our starting 11 of Soccertowns. Up next at number 7, I'm sounding very Casey Kasem right now, a long-distance dedication to Dallas, where soccer spread like wildfire across the North Texas youth sports scene, and Friday night lights had to make room for Saturday morning soccer.
Bill Kinder lit one of those fires when he formed Dallas Sting in 1973, finding players through the newly developed high school girls soccer league.
Lamar Hunt was a promoter of that league, of course. We'll be hearing more about Uncle Lamar later. And the girls voted to name their club after the Paul Newman, Robert Redford movie, R.I.P. Robert Redford. And by the way, the Sting holds up. Sting grew and started to dominate U.S. girls soccer to the point that in 1976, they were the first girls or women's soccer team to travel outside the United States, going to Mexico City to play Mexico's national champion in front of 35,000 fans at the Olympic Stadium. In 1977, Sting became the first American girls team to play in Europe, competing in the Gothia Cup in Sweden and making it to the final.
And in 1984, Sting were invited to represent the U.S. at a FIFA-sanctioned women's tournament in China. They beat Japan, Australia, and China on their way to a matchup with Italy in the final, which they won, becoming the first U.S. women's team, not national team, to win a major international and FIFA title.
Now, a few years ago, Matthew McConaughey was supposed to play Kinder in a movie about Sting, but the production was canceled just weeks before they were going to start filming when an anonymous letter was sent to McConaughey's agents accusing Kinder of inappropriate behavior back in the 80s. The letter was forwarded to the studio, who did an investigation and decided to shut the project down. We have no further information about it, and Kinder has always denied the allegations, so all we know is the on-field legacy of the players, which should be remembered for what it was, historic.
Sting wasn't the only important youth club around Dallas. In 1966, an Englishman named Ron Griffith moved to Texas to study at UT Austin. 2 years later, Griffith moved to Dallas and founded the Texas Longhorn Soccer Club. They were one of the first youth clubs in the North Texas area to travel internationally, and Griffith wanted to repay the hospitality, so in 1980 he started the Dallas Cup.
So Dallas Cup was invitation only, best of the best, every spring during Easter week. And it had a Texas twist that may sound bizarre to youth soccer parents out there who have been forced to book overpriced tournament-approved hotel rooms through tournament-approved travel agencies. The Dallas Cup had an option for teams to stay with local families.
In 1988, the U19 Essex Schools team came from England. On that team was a puny 13-year-old named David Beckham. Making his first visit to the U.S., and he and a teammate were assigned to a family. As he wrote in his 2003 autobiography, Both Feet on the Ground,
"The first people I stayed with were Mexican, and they were really nice people. They were mad about soccer and couldn't do enough for me. All my Essex teammates were staying in these huge houses and being driven around in huge cars. We just get in a pickup and drive down to McDonald's for breakfast every morning. I had such a great week with that family. I sometimes find myself thinking about them even now."
I mean, brilliant. I mean, I'm
That's David Beckham. That's what he sounds like.
In 2001, Catholics and Protestants from Northern Ireland joined forces to form a team in the U19 division.
In 2003, a U13 team was made up of 9 Israeli and 9 Palestinian boys, and each Israeli kid was paired with a Palestinian one for the home state program.
And in 2006, as war ravaged their country, the Dallas Cup brought in an Iraqi U14 national team to compete. When soccer mirrors the best of our country, that's what it can look like.
Some other famous names who played at the Dallas Cup include Clint Dempsey, Chicharito, Landon Donovan, Raul, Andrea Pirlo, Wayne Rooney, and a young Hakeem Olajuwon with the Lagos Stars.
You know, I just gave my tour of Craven Cottage to my students this week.
Plug in your Notre Dame.
Yeah,
By the way, Tom teaches a class that the Notre Dame magazine literally has listed as one of its cool classes at Notre Dame because you get to do stuff like go to a Fulham game with the professor.
Yeah, you know, we took a tour of Craven Cottage, and in their trophy case, they're bragging about their trophy case, right? Our massive trophy case. It's quite small, but it's, where the supporters can see it. And there is the Dallas Cup there. It is a massive trophy, like with cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. They won it at the U19 level, and they couldn't find a way to get it back. So they actually had to buy a plane ticket for the trophy, strap it in, and bring it from Dallas back to London. And there it sits in the trophy case.
Tom cannot help but track down trophies. Pro soccer got a later start in Dallas than some of our other soccer towns. While the first documented soccer match in Dallas took place at SMU in 1916, we don't have the same record of early company teams, mining camps, etc. The first pro team was the Dallas Tornado, co-owned by Lamar Hunt, who, like many other American soccer bosses of the era, had been inspired by the World Cup in 1966.
Technically, it's said that his interest in soccer began in 1962, when he and his future wife Norma took in a Shamrock Rovers game in Dublin. Uncle Lamar was the son of an oil man, an American football owner who coined the name Super Bowl. But he was also a huge advocate for soccer, repeatedly putting his money where his mouth was, in funding youth leagues, pro teams, and stadiums.
The Tornado played the 1967 season in that USA League, which, remember, just featured rebadged foreign teams. So the Tornado were actually, and this thrills our producer Matt, Dundee United. The following year, when the USA and NPSL merged to create the NASL, Hunt and co-owner Bill McNutt had to build a new Tornado team from scratch. They hired Bob Kapp as the coach. The Serbian-born Kapp had studied with Ferenc Puskás at the soccer academy in Hungary, and then fled Hungary with his family during the revolution. Again, just tracking ingredients in the U.S. soccer melting pot. We'll see another Hungarian Revolution exile up in Seattle.
After the NASL folded, pro soccer in Dallas continued indoors with the Dallas Sidekicks, one of the best franchises in U.S. indoor history. And when MLS got going, Uncle Lamar was there to invest, and the Dallas Burn was a founding team. They'd become FC Dallas in 2004, and their academy has been a model of player development for decades, bringing players like Wes McKinney, Ricardo Pepi, and Chris Richards into pro leagues and the national team. And Of course, the National Soccer Hall of Fame is opened in Toyota Stadium, connecting North Texas to U.S. soccer history, which seems just right.
Today, North Texas soccer has over 200,000 players, which is the second largest youth soccer community in the country. More history in the making for Dallas. U.S. Soccer has just moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and Atlanta United are still a young MLS club, but the global game is certainly not new to the New South. Don't let the synthetic turf in Mercedes-Benz Stadium fool you. Soccer in Atlanta has deep roots, and we are happy to have them going box to box at number 8.
And few know more about it than our friend, Patrick Sullivan, an Atlanta native and fellow soccer obsessive. Patrick was kind enough to share some of his New South soccer scholarship with us.
All the way back in the 1870s, as streetcar tracks were being laid all around metro Atlanta, the city decided that in order to operate a streetcar franchise, you had to make improvements to the line, pave the roads.
The Atlanta Roads Commissioner, a guy named William Venable, saw that there would be a huge market for stone and, with his brother, bought rock quarries, including Stone Mountain, Georgia.
Some of you may be ahead of some deeply problematic elements of this history, namely that the Venable brothers were white supremacists who helped bring back the Ku Klux Klan, encouraged cross burnings on Stone Mountain, and would later organize the carving of a Confederate memorial on the rock face. This is soccer history, but again, let's not erase the context.
We won't. So the Venable brothers needed workers for their quarries and for even more profitable cutting of paving blocks. So immigration agents went to Scotland, particularly Aberdeen, a quarry town, which was known for its stone cutters. The Scots, our usual soccer suspects. Most of the immigrants settled in Lithonia, which means city town of stone, in eastern DeKalb County, to mine that granite. So these were our mill guys of the Northeast, our timber and mining camp guys of the Pacific Northwest, hard-working laborers who brought games with them for recreation.
Welsh paving block cutters started coming in the 1890s and early 20th century, joining the Scots in the mines and on the soccer fields. The first organized leagues can be traced to 1906 in a different bit of problematic history. At the start of the new century, Jewish and Catholic immigrants were starting to make their way to the northeast part of the state. Georgian civic leaders wanted to dilute the influence of these undesirable arrivals. So in 1905, a Scottish immigration agent was sent to Aberdeen and came back with 500 or 600 white Protestants, many of whom settled in Atlanta. They connected with the existing Scottish community in DeKalb and said, hey, let's play against each other.
The first documented game that Sullivan can find is a 2-2 draw between Atlanta and Lithonia on Christmas Day, 1907. In the fall of '08, Lithonia and Atlanta organized a 2-team league, with the league office located above the Spalding & Brothers sporting goods stores on Broad Street in downtown Atlanta.
Hello again, Bullets Cahill.
It was the first branch office in the Southeast and solidified Atlanta as a key early soccer town.
Now, that league collapsed pretty quickly when a slowdown in the quarries forced a lot of workers to move away, but it was reformed in 1911 with more teams. Now, the league also knew that it needed to expand the player pool, to Americanize the game, so they pushed to get Marist and Georgia Tech students to play as well.
In 1912, a team of Atlanta All-Stars traveled to Chattanooga to play a game on George Washington's birthday, the first known inner-city match in the Southeast. But in 1913, an Atlanta team traveled to Birmingham, Alabama, which had its own history of coal mining and industrial mills, and had started its own league in the late 1890s. Birmingham smacked Atlanta 4-0, and the Atlanta soccer bosses decided they needed to get more serious about the game.
A new 4-team Georgia State League was created, with Atlanta and Lithonia taking 2 slots. Stone Mountain was the 3rd team, and the 4th was sponsored by Foote and Davies, the biggest book printer in Atlanta, whose apprentices included John and Tom Harland, who'd grown up playing in Northern Ireland. The league champ would get a trophy provided by Spalding. World War I saw many of the Atlanta area players returning to England or going up to Canada to join up and fight, and that adult league wilted.
But after the war, John Harlan, who now had his own printing company, helped restart league soccer in Atlanta. Women started playing as well in the 1920s. These were intramural teams, not varsity, but Girls High had a team by 1925. And colleges like Spelman in Atlanta and Wesleyan in Macon, Georgia, were also playing soccer in phys ed class.
The Great Depression, as we've discussed before, knocked most of that back. As construction slowed and the demand for granite fell, the mines closed, along with the railways that serviced them. The company teams and leagues shut down as well.
And while there were doubtless still pockets of soccer around Atlanta in the Dark Ages, the game wouldn't return in any real way until the Atlanta Chiefs arrived in 1967.
They played in the NPSL, the National Professional Soccer League, and were the brainchild of Dick Cecil, vice president of the Atlanta Braves, who had been inspired by the 1966 World Cup. And he realized, as Bullets Cahill and others had known half a century before, that soccer would be a great way to fill baseball stadiums in the offseason, and the new Atlanta Fulton County Stadium needed to be filled.
So Cecil hired 33-year-old Welshman Phil Woosnam, who had played for West Ham and Aston Villa, to coach the team and occasionally play. What he discovered in Atlanta was a city with no soccer infrastructure. Everything that had been built before the Great Depression was gone. The Georgia State Soccer Association didn't exist. Only a few high schools had teams. Soccer had only been recognized as a boys' sport in 1965, and there was no youth soccer.
So in their first year, the Chiefs ran 390 clinics for over 20,000 kids and coaches in the region. And right before the Chiefs' first training camp in 1967, Woosnam told the Atlanta Constitution, quote, "I have no doubts that the game will be accepted here in Atlanta, the South, and the nation. I just wonder how long it will take for the people to respond to the game," unquote. I know we're a broken record on this, but all of the first chapter of Atlanta soccer history, almost 50 years, had been erased, completely forgotten.
But thanks to the Chiefs, within 2 years there was rec and YMCA leagues in Cobb County, Fulton, Clayton, and DeKalb. And in 1968, when the Chiefs moved to the NASL, they brought the city its first national sports championship. In May 1968, the Chiefs also defeated English First Division champs Manchester City. That was 3-2 at Atlanta Stadium in front of the largest soccer crowd in the region at the time, over 23,000.
Kaiser Motang scored the winning goal in his first game for the Chiefs, and he ended up being the NASL Rookie of the Year. When the star forward returned to South Africa in 1970, he started his own team in Johannesburg, called it the Kaiser Chiefs, and it became the most successful team in the country.
And the name of an English indie rock band for middle-aged guys like us.
Now, 19 years after that Man City game, in May 1987, high school senior Leslie Suter, now a friend of mine, was named Cobb County Girls Player of the Year. But her school didn't even have a sanctioned girls soccer team until her sophomore year.
As we discussed in episode 5, ODP was the best pathway for young women. And Leslie played for Georgia's ODP team, which got her scouted for U19 camps, which is where she met Mia Hamm and the other 99ers. Unlike now, where there are national teams at many age groups, as well as a full national team, back then the only age breakouts were U19 and the senior team. So every good young player was gunning for 46 spots over 2 teams. And that was it.
These days, Atlanta is home to some of the top girls clubs in the country, like Top Hat and Concord Fire. And Fulton County's Roswell High School girls team finished undefeated and ranked number 1 in the country just last spring.
Broadly speaking, thanks to the Chiefs and Title IX and new waves of immigrants, the Atlanta area became a hotbed of youth soccer, which could produce national teamers like Kelly O'Hara from Fayetteville, Clint Mathis of Conyers, Josh Wolf from Gwinnett County, and Ricardo Clark from the south side of Atlanta.
Mexican and Caribbean migration to the area diversified the black and white split that had defined Atlanta soccer. Back in the 60s and 70s, Chiefs players were segregated as black players lived in southwest Atlanta while the white ones lived near Emory. So the sold-out crowds at Mercedes-Benz Stadium since 2017, cheering for Venezuelan stars like Joseph Martinez, along with homegrown players like Caleb Wiley, George Bello, and Johnny Fortune, are reflecting a truly united soccer culture. The various strands of a thriving soccer town still growing after 140 years.
No wonder U.S. Soccer broke ground on its new 200-acre National Training Center in Fayetteville last year. You can't tell the U.S. soccer story without Atlanta.
The story of Soccertown number 9 begins with timber. And if you're from Portland, please skip ahead because our next Soccertown is Seattle.
Oof.
The Pacific North, I know. Sorry, everybody. The Pacific Northwest is one of the country's great historic regions. It's given us national team legends like Casey Keller, Michelle Akers, Chris Henderson, Hope Solo, DeAndre Yedlin. We could have done Portland or Seattle. We'd love to do both. So let's just call this the real prize for the Sounders beating Inter Miami in the League's Cup final.
And full disclosure, we're pretty much just telling the Seattle story as it was told to us by the remarkable Frank McDonald, who grew up in Centralia, just south of Seattle, and has made himself the preeminent historian of Seattle soccer. He also helps
I know,
run the
by the way, I call Tom a preeminent historian of American soccer a lot. Frank is legitimately the preeminent historian.
Yeah, that's the proper application of that descriptor. Love it. Thanks, Frank. He also helps run the Washington State Legends of Soccer website, which has incredible archival stuff. We'll put a link on the episode page.
Okay, timber. Logging companies moved from the East Coast to the Pacific Northwest in the 19th century once they realized that there were, well, a lot of trees there. Immigrants followed, looking for work, and stuck in their isolated logging camps, they'd play soccer. So the first Seattle soccer games that we know of were between rival timber companies, or if not that official, between rival timber camps.
Around the same time, in 1880, representatives of the Black Diamond Coal Mining Company near San Francisco found a very high-quality coal seam in the Washington Territory, about 30 miles south of Seattle. Guess what happened in the new mining town of Black Diamond?
Immigrants came, worked 6 days a week, and played soccer on the 7th.
Surprise, surprise. At first, the miners would just play in their camps, but in 1884, the railroad arrived so that coal could be brought to the port of Seattle. So as the new century started and leagues got going, Black Diamond teams could travel the line for games.
By 1913, the Northwest League included Black Diamond, along with teams like Celtic, Rangers, and Seattle Thistle.
The Scotch professors had made their way west.
Black Diamond would be the dominant team around Seattle until the mid-1920s when coal prices dropped after World War I, which led to strikes, and the company soccer team was a little less of a priority, though Black Diamond would rally in the 1940s.
But as those mines struggled, shipbuilding and repair became big industries during and after the Great War. So teams like Todd Shipyards, founded in 1916, became new powerhouses.
Now, that's not to be confused with Todd Shipyards FC of the ASL in 1921. Hello again, Bullets. That one was based out of Brooklyn. See, Todd Shipyards had a lot of shipyards.
Another big company was started in Seattle in 1916, Boeing. And Boeing teams also dominated through the 1930s and helped sustain leagues through the Great Depression. But Seattle soccer wasn't all civilian and military-industrial complex. Boeing and Todd Shipyards often got beat up by Mrs. Wickman's pies.
And during World War II, as local players were drafted and rosters got thin, the team sponsored by, yes, a pie company, found a controversial way to recruit players. Charlie Managlia was the son of an Italian-born miner who coached Mrs. Wickman's pies. One day in 1944, Charlie overheard two guys speaking Italian at a rail yard and realized they were soccer players. They were also Italian POWs. You see, as the Allies were making their way across Italy and knocking out Mussolini, 50,000 POWs were sent to the U.S., and some of them were approved for what were called Italian Service Units, or ISUs, to do custodial and support work, since so many American men were off fighting.
This was obviously controversial, at a time when Japanese Americans were in internment camps with less freedom than these Italian POWs, when black GIs were not allowed to enter restaurants that Italian POWs could eat in. And yes, Mrs. Wickman's Pies was picking up ringers and won the league in 1944.
Repeat after us. Soccer history is, for better or worse, a mirror of the larger American story.
After the war, the Hungarian Revolution brought a new wave of refugees to Seattle, and one Hungarian, Bálint Dutz, was a baker who got the contract to provide all the pastries to a little local airline called American. He started sponsoring players and in 1959 started the Seattle Hungarians, Seattle Hunkies maybe, who dominated Washington State soccer for a decade.
In the 1960s, universities finally started to compete with amateur clubs. Literally, UW, the University of Washington, started their men's varsity team, the first in the state, in 1962. But because there were no other local colleges to play, the Huskies played in the state men's league. Mike Ryan ran the program from 1966 to 76 and was a force in the development of youth soccer around Seattle. The Dublin-born Ryan wouldn't say no to anyone who loved the game, so when talented young women said they wanted to play, he entered a co-ed team in the state men's league in 1976 and soon had girls' teams producing some of the strongest players in the country, people like Michelle Akers, Sharon McMurtry, and Denise Bender.
Ryan coached a team of his Western Stars to a championship at the National Sports Festival in 1985 and included many Seattle players on the first U.S. women's national team, which we brought to the Mundialito in Italy a couple weeks later, a story we told in episode 5.
Unfortunately, UW wouldn't make women's soccer a varsity sport until 1991, so all those women left Washington to play college soccer. As Frank McDonald put it, UW could have been UNC.
Another Seattle legend, Cliff McCrath, surpassed Ryan as a college coach, leading Seattle Pacific to 5 Division II titles and retiring second on the all-time collegiate coaching wins list. So yeah, a lot of history.
And if you're a Seattle soccer fan with a closet full of Sounders scarves, maybe now looking for a vintage Black Diamond kit, maybe some of this is new to you. But even the Sounders have a longer history than many realize. The original Sounders, and that name was picked over other options like Cascades, Evergreens, Mariners, Schooners, and Sockeyes, were in the NASL from 1974 to 83.
And the Sounders were a community team. Current Sounders coach Brian Smetzer grew up in North Seattle and signed for the Sounders out of high school in 1980. But he also has a home movie of some of the players coming to his birthday party when he was a kid.
After the Sounders made it to the Soccer Bowl in 1977, Frank McDonald, then a high school senior, reached out to the team to see if maybe they could host a clinic at his school about 90 miles south of the city. Just a few weeks after that narrow loss to the Cosmos, 4 starters from the Sounders team showed up at Centralia High School. That is how you make fans for life.
Sure is. So after the NASL folded, the Sounders chugged along in second division leagues like the APSL, the ASL, and the USL. That was until 2009 when they joined MLS. Fans were asked to choose a name for their new team. It was an online poll, and the choices were Seattle FC, Seattle Republic, and Seattle Alliance. Good thing there was no Real Seattle.
Dynamo Seattle. As we've seen so many times in this series, the soccer people were choosing to ignore their history, to sever the links to the deep roots of the game.
However, Seattle fans remembered, and the team backpedaled, adding a write-in option to the online poll. Sounders won overwhelmingly.
Since 2016, the team has been coached by local legend Brian Schmetzer, who, with his 2 brothers, grew up playing club ball on the state champion Lake City Hawks team coached by his father, Walter, an ex-pro who'd come over from Germany.
Walter ran one of the 2 main soccer stores in Seattle, Schmetzer's Sport House. That was the place you got the good stuff, Puma, Adidas, exotic European keeper pants.
The other one was called Soccer Specialties, run by a Welshman named Denzel Miskell. As Frank McDonald puts it, you'd get the off-brand stuff there, the shirts with 2 stripes. And sometimes when you went to pick up the cleats you'd ordered, there'd be a sign on the door to go find Denzel across the street at a bar called The Rendezvous. Miskell was a beloved figure in the Seattle soccer community as well.
Personally, we think every soccer town needs a Schmetzer and a Miskell. For number 10, we're going to do for the Bay Area what we couldn't do for the Pacific Northwest, and combine 2 cities. And we realize that San Francisco and Oakland may resent having to share, but hey.
It's our show. And if you're thinking, whoa, hang on, San Francisco has soccer history, I can't name a famous San Francisco team, then you are in the right place.
We've always got to start with the immigrants. So as early as 1852, over half the males in San Francisco were foreign-born. English immigrants set up an organization called the Sons of St. George, and in 1866, the Scots established the Caledonia Club.
Which some of you may recall was also the birthplace of the AFA over on the East Coast.
Yeah, yeah, and there's some documentation of loosely organized games of football in San Francisco, in parallel to what was happening back east.
By the mid 1880s, sailors bunking at the Sailors Institute on Stewart Street would play soccer at a field across the way. And in 1889, a Scot named Edgar Pomeroy arrived in Oakland from Sacramento. Pomeroy's dream was an organized soccer league in the city. And so from his gym class at the YMCA, teams like the Oaklands and East Oaklands emerged, and soccer games were being played on a little piece of land at 12th Street and Madison.
In 1902, Pomeroy and some other early soccer men put together what was initially called the California Football League, and then became the San Francisco Soccer Football League.
Now the oldest U.S. soccer league in continuous existence, the SFSFL started with 6 teams: Independence, Albion Rovers, Thistle FC, always got to be a Thistle, Oakland Hornets, and the American British Rifles.
But our favorite founding club, Vampires. Good friend of the pod, Brian Bunk, has done a lot of scholarship on these NorCal soccer roots, and he's traced the inspiration for Vampires to the Crouch End Vampires of London. Our Vampires were based in Alameda and had black jerseys with a cool emblem. They might have been made out of worsted wool. San Fran weather can get pretty rough. All those founding clubs, except for Thistle, were in the East Bay.
And the Oakland teams dominated the first decade, but as the league started to grow, the San Francisco-based Barbarians helped shift the balance of power. Much of this history comes from a remarkable document produced by unofficial SFSFL historian Sean McGeever, who put together a history of the league for its 100th anniversary back in 2002.
But before we get back to the league, let's circle back to episode 1, because the Corinthians team, whose 1906 tour inspired Thomas Cahill to grow American soccer, also made it out to San Francisco, where they played and pounded a local all-star team.
Now, a scan down the list of the SFSFL champions is a snapshot of over a century of Bay Area demographics. You've got the early English and Scottish teams, the Tony Olympic Club team regularly battling Union Ironworks through the teens and the 20s until the factory team shut down due to the Great Depression.
As Caledonians and Vampires fell out of league in the mid-1920s, they were replaced by Italian teams from the social clubs that sprang up in North Beach, like Italia Virtus and Union Sportiva Italiana, who brought more flair to the Bay Area game, and Viking Athletic Club, which was started by Danish immigrants in 1922 and still exists today.
The 40s added Union Española, which became a real pathfinder club for the city's growing Latin population. Athletic Club Teutonia often dominated the league table. The 1950s saw the best results for San Francisco's only Jewish club, Hakoah AC, while post-war Greek refugees made the Greek American AC a superpower from the 1950s really to the early 1990s, before the champions became teams like Mezcala, Deportivo, El Farolito.
And El Farolito is the club sponsored by that Mexican restaurant, and they made some good runs in recent U.S. Open Cup tournaments.
And of course, always appearances by Vikings, Italian Athletic Club, and the Gents of the Olympic Club. Now, there's one very obvious group missing from that Bay Area ethnic stew: Chinese Americans. Some of that is obviously due to racism. Attitudes towards Chinese immigrants, from snide write-ups of Chinese boxing matches and baseball games in the 19th century, all the way up to the institutional racism of the Chinese Exclusion Act, discouraged or prevented participation. But in 1919, a Chinese YMCA soccer team was able to defeat both Stanford and the University of California. And today, the North California Chinese Soccer Federation is the largest Chinese soccer organization in North America. That is not a comprehensive Chinese American Bay Area soccer history. This episode is a collection of sketches, but obviously they need to be in the picture.
Something else missing from the story so far are pro teams. Today, Oakland Roots and Oakland Soul are tapping into the, Bay Area soccer roots and soul. Bay FC is setting attendance records at Oracle Park. But there's a snapshot of Bay Area soccer history in 2 teams that didn't last long enough, but reflect distinct aspects of U.S. sports culture.
The first is the San Francisco Deltas, who were put together by a group of tech executives and venture capitalists. And the headline of a 2016 article in Inc. magazine was, quote, "Why San Francisco's new pro soccer team thinks like a startup. Founded and funded by Silicon Valley veterans, the Deltas hope to be the most innovative club in the world's most popular sport."
They should have used AI to shorten that title.
I know. Sorry, I need to take a quick shower after that. Look, we're not going to spend too much of the Bay's time on the Deltas, but it's a cautionary tale, right?
Sure is. Tech and venture capital barging into an industry, thinking they can disrupt it and leaving it worse than they found it. Absolutely. To wit, the Deltas hired a director of marketing who admitted she had, quote, no business being the director of marketing of anything, really, unquote.
The Deltas, and this was, remember, in 2016, promised to offer a virtual reality fan experience as well as an AI ticketing system because, yes, that's very achievable and also extremely necessary.
Not to mention there are no Deltas in the Bay Area. I mean, Mississippi Deltas? Yeah, we'll take that. But the tech and VC bros love throwing around buzzwords like Delta. So why not make it the name of your team?
The ownership group also planned a stadium downtown, which was, like, physically and financially impossible. So they played in Kezar Stadium in Golden Gate Park, which is mostly public and hosts high school football games. So the grass is terrible and also lined for football. And there's no parking. Anyway, the players were good. Mark Dos Santos did a very nice job of coaching. They won the NASL title in 2017 and then folded 12 days later.
A cautionary tale about pro sports, for sure. Let's leave the Bay Area with a better story, though, even if it was also brief. This one is about the gentleman I had a privilege of speaking with recently, and I've known for a while, Derek Lechty. Derek was born in Santa Barbara in 1932 and started playing when he was 10, and he's been a soccer obsessive ever since. The summer before college, he played in the SFSFL, and over the years suited up for and against teams like Olympic Club and Vikings. He captained the team at Stanford, and a broken leg knocked him out of one of the Olympic tryouts.
After college, he was working in Chile and enrolled in a referee academy for fun, like you do. And then in 1966, he heard about a new soccer league that was starting up back in the States, the NPSL, which was being put together by an old acquaintance, William Cox.
Cox was a businessman and sports owner who had been promoting summer exhibitions known as the International Soccer League, a precursor to our friend Charlie Stillentano, and Cox thought the time was right for a new pro league.
And he wasn't the only one. In a throwback to our episode 1 alphabet soup of leagues, another new league, the USA, was also slated to start up in 1967. U.S. Soccer announced that it would recognize the USA, but not the NPSL, and FIFA followed suit. So the NPSL was an outlaw league. But Derek Lechty didn't care. He gave up his 9-to-5 job to be GM of the Oakland Clippers. And if the league didn't have official sanctioning, it did have a deal with CBS television, which the USA didn't get. Only problem? Back in the 60s, American TV networks didn't know how to broadcast soccer. Play had to be stopped regularly for commercials, and sometimes refs would even tell a player to fake an injury to give CBS a minute to cut away.
And the CBS colorman was Danny Blanchflower, an Irishman who played in England and spent every game pointing out how bad the players were.
But again, Derek had his dream job, and he made the most of it. He knew the key to long-term success would be youth development, so he hired a youth director to put on clinics and develop teams and leagues around the Bay Area, which is how the California Youth Soccer Association, now the largest youth soccer program in the country, got started.
The Clippers were to play at Kezar Stadium, where the Deltas ended up, but on the day the team owner showed up to see it, Lechty instead drove them over the Bay Bridge to the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum.
As Lechty says, quote, "Have you been to Kezar Stadium? The wind, the dreary sky, all of it stinks for soccer. I knew Oakland was the better choice for the Clippers," unquote.
Good to have local knowledge.
And good to be an actual soccer person. Again, the Deltas could have used one.
This team had a Yugoslavian contingent, but featured players from 10 countries, and it brought the Bay Area an NPSL treble. Lechty even convinced Pele and his Santos team to play an exhibition match against the Clippers in Oakland.
After that amazing first season, the NPSL merged with the USA, and the Clippers found themselves in the new NASL. At the end of the 1968 season, though, the NASL teams in San Diego, LA, and Vancouver folded, leaving Oakland with no one to play within 1,000 miles. So the Clippers dropped from the league. But Lechty didn't drop out of soccer. He got even more involved, because while publicly he was always a soccer guy, he was also always something else. As he put it, quote, "I was a closeted gay soccer player," unquote. And finally, in the 1980s, he was able to bring those two parts of himself together.
As only the game can do. The Federation of Gay Games, a quadrennial event that launched in San Francisco in 1982, coincided with the growing AIDS epidemic that was devastating the Bay Area. Lechty found a sense of purpose and community in the Gay Games. He refereed its first ever soccer match and continued volunteering for years. The Gay Games are now the largest LGBTQ plus sports and culture event in the world. And in 2006, he was given their highest award for service.
Derek Lechty has had a lasting impact on Bay Area soccer, adding to its history and pushing its diversity and inclusivity into areas that, for too long, were left on the margins. We don't need AI ticketing. Just let everyone play. That is how you make a soccer town.
Well said, my friend. Which brings us to our final soccer town, number 11, our lone striker up top. And that one is up to you.
That's right. Look, we said at the beginning that this is a list, not the list. And we could have gone with San Diego, the border town with the year-round soccer, insane youth team culture, and pro clubs like the Wave and San Diego FC.
Or Detroit. That's really close to our friend Alexi Lawless's hometown. Plus, my son played for Detroit City in the USL. Very cool city that's growing the game.
Look, I live in Los Angeles. I helped start a girls' club here. We could easily be talking about soccer in this city, which is really a galaxy of soccer towns. No offense to LAFC fans, of which I am an original.
Or Chicago, or Cary, North Carolina, or Bentonville, where our friend Chris Martinovich is helping build a new USL club in Northwest Arkansas. I tried to convince him to call it NWA, by the way.
So here's what we thought. Technically, he's still considering. So here's what we thought. Let's let you all decide. Let us know what team should be in the starting 11 and whoever we hear about the most.
Or whoever makes the most compelling argument.
We'll do an entire episode on that town in season 2. Just hit us up on social media or soccertownmedia@gmail.com. We will put links to all of the contact places in the notes.
But for now, time to take off the gloves, head to the locker room, and jump in an ice bath. This was a long one.
I think we played a full night.
And injury time.
So until next season, or the next mini episode, if we have something to say, this is
An American Game.
This episode of An American Game is a production of Soccertown Media and was written by me, Kirk Rudell.
And me, Tom McCabe.
If you want to hear more of my thoughts on soccer, Hollywood, or whatever I happen to be annoyed by, and the list is getting longer, you can find me on Bluesky at rudell@bsky.com.
As for me, as you may know, I'm not a big presence on the Soccertown Media Instagram. Kirk has had me in the archives digging up the next story, and we've got some lined up for you, some good ones.
And yes, you can reach out to the show, though, through Soccertown Media Instagram or soccertownmedia@gmail.com. Now then, An American Game is a team effort. Our supervising producer and editor is the great Matthew Nelson.
Our videos are produced by Larry Garrity.
Our theme music was composed by our old friend and former teammate, the multi-talented, multi-hyphenate Patrick White.
And a special thanks to the Society for American Soccer History, aka the Avengers.
And thanks to you for listening. You have also come through this episode. That makes you part of the team. So if you like what you heard, please, I know everyone asks, but it helps. Subscribe, rate, review, tell your friends.
And tell Alexi.
And yeah, if you see Alexi, tell him. Thanks, everybody.